In this video, I present the remaining four movements from Lebègue's first suite in D minor, and what we have here is a Sarabande, a Gavotte, a Menuet, and a Canaris. Now, this last movement, the Canaris, basically what it denotes is a dance that was inspired by an indigenous dance of the Canary Islands. However, what I would say is that the way Lebègue is using it here, in many respects, it is very reminiscent of a gigue. This has to do, first of all, with its rhythmic profile, but it also has to do with the way Lebègue is presenting it. And I would say there are two features that pertain to its main subject, its main motive, that are very characteristic of the way gigues are presented. The first has to do with the fact that the opening motive is immediately imitated. So we have this kind of imitative texture at the very beginning of both the first section and the second section. What I mean by this is that we have this subject, which is immediately imitated. So this is the beginning. And then in the second section, we have the exact same procedure. So here, we have this imitation. The other thing that also happens with gigues is the fact that usually the subject from the first section is also the basis for the subject of the B section, only here the subject is reversed. That means that we reverse the intervals of the subject. Here Lebègue is not being very strict. However, the very opening, there is this kind of inversion. So in the first section we have this. So we go up and then down. And in the B section, the second section, so instead of going up, we go down. And then of course it kind of changes. I mean, we have this, already the interval has been altered, and then after that this kind of inversion is no longer applicable. However, we do have these very characteristic elements from the gigue here in the Canaris. What this means, now if we look at the suite as a whole, is that we have a fairly standard, at least from what we expect, knowing 18th century repertory and especially the suites of Johann Sebastian Bach, we have a fairly normal presentation of movements here. So we start with a prelude, then the Allemande, a pair of courantes, a Sarabande, then what we usually like to say optional dance movements. Here we have a Gavotte and a Menuet, and then finally a Canaris. Okay, we expect a gigue, but this Canaris is very, very close to this. So we have this fairly regular presentation of movements, and I'm mentioning this because in the 1670s, when Lebègue published these suites, this order of movements, what we are familiar with, had not actually been fixed yet. What I mean by this is that on the one hand, we can't really expect to have this prelude, Allemande, courante, Sarabande, gigue order at all. We can have these movements mixed in different ways. But also another thing that happens sometimes is that perhaps we get these movements, but we get them in the first half of the suite, and then we have a bunch of different dances for the remainder part, and sometimes a suite is not going to end with a more, shall we say, flashy movement like a gigue, or in this case a Canaris, but it may end with something a little more subdued like a Menuet. This is what Rameau does in his very first suite that he published in A minor. This is also what Martine does in his first suite in D minor. So what we see here may appear familiar to us. However, this was not necessarily normal for this time. Another thing that I would like to mention here has to do with the Sarabande, and here I would like to take up this issue that I mentioned last time, this notion of B flat and B natural kind of coexisting and having this fairly fluid tonal profile. Now, in the Sarabande, and I'm going to get to that page, this in two places here actually affects how we are going to render a particular trill, because the trill has to be on the note B, and the question is whether we have to use B flat or B natural. And I'm actually mentioning this because my choice is to use B natural, and I will show you those two spots that I'm talking about. However, there is a recording out there that is using B flat. And I'm not trying to suggest that my solution is necessarily the more correct one or anything like that. Simply to tell you that there is this kind of fluency, and therefore there are these places where perhaps there's more than one possible answer, more than one possible solution. In this particular case, the very first instance happens in the first bar of the piece, and here you will also notice that we have also a fluidity, this kind of a note existing in two different versions, also between F natural and F sharp, so that we start. So first F natural, and then leading to G minor. Now, what happens is that in this second chord, I'm supposed to play a trill on A, and the question is, how do we do this? Do we do it with B natural or B flat? Now, one could think that the B flat is more logical in the way that it leads to the B flat of the next chord, so that you can do, sorry. So it's all B flat. However, as we've seen in this entire suite, Lebègue likes to play with this kind of ambiguity, and I think in this particular instance, I feel that I want to play with this ambiguity too, and actually play B natural. Let's also keep in mind that in this suite, since it is in D minor, we expect the key signature to have a B flat. However, we have no key signature here. There are no flats. So the natural state of B is really natural. So I choose to do this. The same thing happens midway through the second section. We have something similar again. Another instance where we have the note A and we're supposed to introduce a trill, and the very next moment has a B flat, the very next moment. So here we have something like this. So we have to play a trill, which we have to decide. So this way we kind of prepare the B flat. However, even here I choose to do this. In other words, continuing to play with this ambiguity between B natural and B flat. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the performance.
Thank